Welcome to the Fall to Grace. I'm Cyan,
And I'm Connor.
and today we're going to talk more about fear, a continuation of last week's episode. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about kind of the microcosm of fear in our daily lives. I was thinking about that a lot this week since that last episode, and I had an experience that pretty perfectly encapsulates kind of what we were talking about. I was walking my dog through the park, and there's this pedestrian crosswalk with big ass signs, and then a cyclist comes flying through and then yells at me for crossing the pedestrian crosswalk. I was so frustrated in that moment, and I was like, wow, that is a perfect example of fear. I mean, I'm sure he's experiencing fear, and I'm also experiencing fear. He hit on this deep feeling of, I'm not in the right place, and I'm doing something wrong, and everybody's watching me, and I'm making a fool of myself. You know, him yelling at me was like a confirmation, like, yes, you are in the wrong place. Get out of my way. You don't know what you're doing, and you're a piece of shit. Just plays on my fear. So that's, I think, a perfect example of what we were kind of talking about last week, and a perfect example of 99% of our day is fear. We're just basking in our fear of small things and our fear of big things, our fear of being left behind and, not getting invited to the party, and our fear of really big things like death, and our fear of everything in between. It just kind of runs our minds until we begin to really work on that. So that's what we're going to talk about today is fear and how to get a handle on it
How to get free from it.
and how to get free from it.
That is such a good example of the predicament that we're in. And that's kind of what I want everybody to understand is that this daily fear is extremely palpable and it's extremely deep. In that story, you kind of touched on how just one little example, when we get extremely frustrated with other people or places or our job, it's generally because those things are like these micro expressions of these larger fears that we have within us. So the problem themselves is not the interactions that we have. The interactions that we have with people, we so much put our fear into those situations and they're activated without our understanding. So until we've dealt with some of those deeper things, it gets extremely hard to have better daily interactions. And what you've talked about is fear presenting as anger, right? And last time we talked about how fear can present as a bunch of these things, like present as anger or depression or irritation. All of those are fear-based emotions. Anger is just fear and drag. And that right there is a window into a larger understanding of ourselves and our predicament. But we have to get free from that predicament. But how do we handle these fears within ourselves such that we're using these examples in our lives to kind of break free from those things? When we start to switch into a more spiritual frame of mind, and we do experience some of these shifts, like those are opportunities for our own awakening. Every little interaction that we have is not some minor inconvenience or some major inconvenience. It becomes this opportunity for us to see a little bit more about ourselves, which is a total shift in the way that we're living our lives.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit last week too, how all of these things are just a mirror. Our rage and how we engage with other people's rage, it's all just a mirror. It's all an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the help is not necessarily within you all of the time. Albert Einstein said something along the lines of the same mind who created the problems can't be the same mind who fixes the problem. And that's one of the harder parts of this is trying to work on ourselves is inherently a predicament that I can change myself with the same patterns of behavior and the same patterns of thought that I've been using to create these problems in the first place. So we do have to turn to something a little bit larger and something a little bit bigger for our understanding. One of the biggest things here, and I think you talked about it in the first episode, Cyan, was just about contextualizing your life and how spirituality can help you do that. And I want to go a little bit deeper into how do we contextualize this fear and how do we make sense of this and how do we kind of change out of it?
I love that Albert Einstein quote. I think that pretty perfectly encapsulates how you and I have managed to get here, which is calling upon something greater than ourselves, to get us through this experience. And that's kind of what you have to do at a certain point. You have described to me this experience of like falling to your knees and just saying, help me, to something bigger than you. That's kind of what we're doing here. We're calling upon something bigger and recognizing just how big a higher power is, because a higher power does include destruction. It's kind of like a volcano. A volcano is big, it explodes, and it's destructive. It destroys everything around it. But the nutrients that come from like volcanic ash are amazing for growing things, and lava creates islands. And think about Hawaii, that's all created by volcanic activity, and it's one of the most lush, beautiful places on the planet. So destruction does beget beauty and creation, and creativity and art and love and joy and all the things that we want. But when we start to be able to contextualize our experience through that lens, things become a lot less scary. We can start to like take our lumps without, losing it.
We live in such defiance of destruction. Like we are so afraid of losing things, whether it be a house or a relationship or a person, that we get really frustrated when those things happen, and we come to this point where we don't really understand what's going on. And so we kind of do everything in our power to make sure that once we've created something that it stays in place and that we can rely upon it. But the truth of everything is that nothing is permanent. And this is whether you do take like a Buddhist tradition or a Christian tradition or whatever you're looking at. This is one of the central ideas that underscore any spirituality, is that things do come into existence and then they disappear from existence. And so we have to take a bigger view of things in order to be able to kind of come to grips with our own personal creation and destruction. You and me and everybody else are constantly changing. We are not the same people that we were. I mean, not even our skin cells are the same. Like our whole body regenerates and every single cell in it is different. And yet our consciousness is still kind of the same. So it comes to how do we reconcile these ideas that death is pretty constant in our lives, yet we don't want it to happen as much as possible. I have been studying a little bit about forestry, and the United States, since the beginning of the 20th century, has had a full policy of fire prevention and fire suppression. And so we have had firefighters and forest workers and rangers working on suppressing fires as quickly as possible. We had this 48-hour policy where it was like if you saw smoke, you had to put it out as quickly as possible. And this is just how our Forest Service has operated for years and years and years. But what's happened is that we now have these massive fires that are happening in LA and other parts of the country that are causing rampant destruction. And what's happening with those fires is that they are so big because there's such a reserve of dead fuels at the feet of our forests, because the fire serves a purpose to clear out dead fuels. Like the trees are dying, they need to be kind of purged from the environment. But in our act of fire suppression, we've prevented that from happening. So now when the fires hit, they're hitting all of those dead fuels and they're becoming much larger and much more vicious. And so fire has a huge role in that creation and a huge role in the health of our forests. But we, being so afraid of property damage and things like that, have prevented that from happening at all. And now we find ourselves in this major predicament. This is the same predicament that we as individuals kind of find ourselves in. Like when we don't let events in our lives or we don't personally explore ourselves, we don't create any space for that fire to come in and destroy those old feelings and those old resentments and things like that. And so we in turn become like the forest with a whole bunch of dead shit just holding on to us, and everything is painful. And all that dead shit that's within us makes one of those interactions in the park so horrible, right? It ruins your day because it's playing on all of that. The fire is much bigger than it should be, right? Objectively, that is an interaction between a cyclist and a pedestrian, but it's so loaded with whatever they're bringing to the situation, whatever you're bringing to the situation, that it becomes huge and it becomes something that you have to think about for a very long time. The goal is to clear out the parts of ourselves that don't serve us anymore. And in that way, we operate a lot cleaner in life. So yes, absolutely. This is all about creation as much as destruction almost more in our daily lives, and coming to terms with that. So how do we do that is the real question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the way that I've really dealt with my fear successfully is by alchemizing it, by like looking at it in the face, recognizing it for what it is, and just dealing with it head on. Because if you allow it to be alchemized, your bad experiences can change you for the better, you know?
Yeah, this is a fundamental shift in how we view the things in our lives. These have now gone from things that are happening to me to things that are happening for me. And this is a crucial point, is that when I do start to use these things, they're the things that change. It's not like the event's going to change and we're not going to avoid the destruction that we fear so much, but we start to see purpose and meaning in the destruction and in the impermanence of things.
Yeah, that like process of alchemization, that's kind of karma yoga. And it does change us for the better when we start to really utilize it as a tool. I know that you have other strategies though. What is your strategy for dealing with fear?
The big shifts that have happened for me over the years have been through a more careful understanding of how I fit into the grand scheme of things. You know, when I was coming to God and coming to a spiritual journey, one of the fundamental questions was, why am I so scared when this universe is 2 trillion galaxies large. I'm on a tiny planet, which is a tiny speck of dust. And on that planet, I'm a speck of dust. And yet I'm so afraid that I'm unworthy of being here. Like, wow, it's all meaningless. It's all worthless. We're a swirling ball of Earth just hurtling through this universe at millions of miles an hour. And I had never really leaned into the idea, is what I'm trying to say. Once I really started leaning into that idea, I really started to find more answers rather than more nothingness. And my fears did start to fall away as I kind of embraced that as part of my identity. Like, I am just this alien little creature having an experience in this universe. I'm not the most important thing here. There's a million things going on all around me at all times. And yet I am so hyper fixated on how to get my way and get what I need out of life. But when I take a step back and I can look at that bigger picture, I start to understand that my needs are not the most important thing in the world, and that I don't even know what the most important thing in the world is. So I have to find a way to be more comfortable in my insignificance. And in that way, I found my own significance. But it really starts with reconciling these ideas. And this is what guides me to a sense of higher power and things. If I can take that idea of impermanence and constant destruction and constant change in the universe, I can take that to myself and I can start to pretend that I am, the activity of the cosmos. So when I kind of identify a little bit more big, I have a much better chance of having a good experience or having at least a calm experience, because I understand that I'm just part of something bigger than myself. It's not all about me. Like, this is a much bigger experience than I give it credit for in my daily life.
I mean, yes, objectively, we are very small, but the more we walk the path, the more we realize how much our small actions create a ripple effect. Someone the other day kind of complimented our Tuesday group and said, "You don't know how much this impacts people. Like, this actually really does matter." And I believe that to be true. And I think even just having friends over and laughing and singing and just sharing in life, that stuff makes a huge difference. And so, like, when you begin to get on the path, you begin to get right sized, which is a great phrase you used earlier. Can I define it? Sometimes our internal pendulum swings and makes us believe we're the most important person in the world. Sometimes the pendulum of our ego swings the other direction and makes us feel like we're the biggest piece of shit in the world. We begin to get right sized when we realize, no, neither of those things are true, and both are a little bit narcissistic. It needs to be somewhere in the middle. I'm worthy and valuable and important, and yet I'm not like the shit like that. So on this path, we start to get right sized, and then service becomes of more importance. And in the last episode, I talked about how, fear manifests as all kinds of things, bitchiness or a need for power or even just pure laziness. It can manifest as all kinds of things that really hurt us in the end. And so, yeah, on this path, we realize that okay, we are specks of dust, but also our station in this life is important. We have a responsibility to like do our best, even though we don't really know what our best is or what the best is, or if there's an objective good and bad. I mean, I don't really believe that there is an objective good and bad, but it's still important to like try.
This human life, I don't know what it is about it. It is extremely important, extremely sacred. And when we do lean more into what we perceive to be important, we do understand that our effect is palpable. But when we are so hyper fixated on how am I going to do my job? I hope they don't get mad at me today. Oh no, I got a bad email. I'm in debt. I need to buy a car. Like, when we get trapped in the daily life, it takes us away from the more experiential aspects of life. And we can't necessarily square those two ideas all the time. We have the experience of one and the experience of the other. And so this is about squaring those experiences. How do I make a meaningful life out of a mundane life? And how do I encourage more of those like experience driven, good experiences, bad experiences, profound experiences is what we're looking for in my life to create that meaning and to have that meaning without getting caught up in the car payment and in the rent and things like that.
Hmm. It's going back to that word. It's about contextualizing the car payment and the rent payment and all that stuff. And what is it teaching me? We start to ask that about everything, every single thing, the shitty, the mundane, the extravagant, the profound. Well, you realize that everything's profound, actually.
It certainly can be. What happens here is that you realize that the universe or God or whatever this is actually in conversation with you. So many of us, and I think just in the connotation of spirituality, think that like we are praying into the ether and that we're praying for success and we're praying for safety and security and those things, which a lot of people do. in their spiritual lives. But ultimately, that's unrewarding too, because you're left with like this disappointment that I didn't get rich, or there's still war going on and I prayed for world peace, and there's still hunger and I prayed for the end of world hunger. But you realize a little bit more as you lean into both being a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of dust and this profound human experience, that like your life is in front of you and that this thing is helping you in your daily life. And every event that happens to you has an aspect of something that you need to be learning in order to progress in this life. That's the fundamental shift here, is that these stop being those inconveniences and they start being our lessons. When we start to realize that there's a lesson here, we can start to enter into the conversation. Most of us are out of the conversation right now, just saying, why is this happening to me? I wish I could just be in bed, comfortable, curled up, right? No, it's about being in these experiences, and it's about making it through these experiences and growing through them. And that's when everything starts to change.
Everything starts to change when you stop asking, why me? And you start asking, sure, why not me? Like, I am just one of the many, and it makes sense that I would have to experience this pain and suffering. And I got a ticket the other day. Why not me? You know?
It's all part of the dance. Every ticket you get, every relationship you have, every conversation you have, it's part of the dance. And so the goal here is just to not be so petrified by that fear that we were talking about. I mean, the fear is what really keeps us from being able to engage in this conversation, because we're so afraid that this is going to happen, and we're so afraid of like the future bad feeling. We are constantly trying to avoid the future bad feeling such that we don't even realize that we're already experiencing that feeling in the present. So when we do contextualize, what we do is we create a lot of space and we create a lot of room to kind of operate in. And it, like you said, it's not happening to me, right? Like, why not me? Like, give me the experience. I want to learn. I want to grow. And when you start to want to learn and to grow in your life, everything starts getting better. And not necessarily better in the sense that you're going to be more wealthy or more physically fit or anything like that. But you will start to be the person you are without fear. And the person you are without fear is objectively a much better experience to be having, right? However that lands for any of us. We're all very different in how that's going to manifest, but we are all very similar and kind of the fears that we have and that unworthiness that we hold on to so desperately.
I think a lot of people, when they think of prayer, this is kind of what you're just saying, they ask for world peace or like, please, help my sick dog recover. And I'm not bashing that. I get it. But it's also like, I think the more interesting question to ask when you're going through that experience is, God or Goddess, what can I learn from this? How can I get through this? Please help me get through this out on the other side, being a more well-rounded, whole person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The experience that you're talking about and like the shift here is like when we're praying for the job. I really want this job. Just give me this job. Please, God, give me this job. Like, what we're not taking into account is like, what if this job is terrible for you? What if you are going to be so miserable in this job and it's not the right thing for you, right? So when we open the door to prayer, the idea is to open it beyond our own desires and opening it up to something that is right for us. It's not about like, this one has the biggest paycheck, so I really want that one. It's like, that might not be the thing you need right now. And this is where the game starts to change again, right? And I start going, oh, do I not need that much money? Do I not need that kind of position in my life? What do I need? How am I going to be most helpful in this experience? And the game all changes from there.
Yes. Yes. Think about the fundamental difference in energy between, I'll use this example of me and the cyclist again. And I did this for a moment, but I did catch myself being like grumbling and pissed off, rah, 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 like shaking my fist in the air, which I did. But imagine it would have been really easy for me to hold on to that for like a couple hours. That's what I would have done kind of before I really started to have this as a spiritual practice, this karma yoga. I would just fucking hold on to this certain vibration for hours and hours. Or, when I used to work as a bartender and someone would piss me off, my whole shift would be ruined. And I'm sure everyone out there can relate to that vibrational frequency. This sounds a little woo-woo, but it's true. You can feel it in your body. And then, think about like the difference in energy. This is something I experienced with the cyclist when I decided to like alchemize it and learn from it. In that moment, I said, that didn't need to piss me off so bad. I thought about it. I realized why it bothered me so much, and I worked through it.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there is like approaching my life with curiosity is a better way to do this than approaching my life with this understanding of like who I am, what this is, what he is, right? He's just an asshole and I'm some innocent person right here. Because in that scenario, like, we play into the victimization of ourselves. And there's nothing to learn from a situation when you're playing the victim. So as we do start to contextualize and as we do start to ask a few more of those questions about like what is going on here? What is this experience trying to teach me? I have this opportunity to grow. And it has nothing to do with that guy. It has everything to do with my personal reaction to this situation. Like the enemy in these situations is not necessarily the event themselves. Bad things are going to happen to us. We are going to get sick. We are going to get our order wrong. We are going to experience problems in traffic. Like those things are just going to happen. It's a question of how we handle those things. And that's what really dictates the quality of our experience, right? If I'm going to get mad at all of those experiences all the time, like they forgot my drink, and if I'm just going to hold on to that for the rest of the day, the next 3 hours about how this waiter forgot my drink, then I'm experiencing that for those 3 hours. And I'm experiencing the fear and I'm experiencing the feelings of worthlessness. What I have in those moments is a real opportunity to liberate that, right? And in those moments, I can say, it's okay. Like this is just making me upset because I'm afraid. And it's okay to be afraid. And I can relax into the situation. I don't have to hold on to it as much. I don't have to bring that home with me and ruminate about it. That creates so much space for a higher quality experience. And I can focus a little bit better on the things that I'm grateful for and the things that are going well in my life. Because those things are going to happen. And we can't act as if they're not. And that's so much of what we try to do. We try to create situations that are so perfect that nothing can go wrong. But what we should be doing is creating situations where things can go wrong so that we can learn from the things that went wrong. When we have an attitude of curiosity, we are taking on an attitude of betterment and like improving our lives and learning from our lives. And that's a very different kind of perspective than the one that we typically walk through our lives with. And when I kind of understand that the world is much bigger than I thought it was, that there's a lot more going on, I stop playing such the victim. And this is just what we do in our daily lives is play the victim, play the victim, play the victim. Why me? Please not me. Why me? And when we do that, we're set up for one outcome, which is a miserable one. And so when we don't do that and we start to engage in our experience, we find that those outcomes are lessons. If we start asking for them, we start moving into our lessons with a much more vigor. And that's when we really start to create purpose and meaning in our lives, because the purpose and meaning in your life is not the spreadsheet. It's not the job. It's not doing the deals for the other people. It's your authenticity and your creative self that is going to give you the meaning in that life and learning from these things. Fear and pain are persistent and unavoidable parts of our lives. But we live in such fear of the pain that we don't open ourselves up to more than a scared experience. We don't experience pain every single day of our lives, but we live in fear that we will experience pain every single day of our lives. So as we start to deal with our fears and we start to liberate those fears in however you want to do it, whether it be through a breathwork class or it be through meditation or it be through active processing, what we're doing is creating space within ourselves for a different experience, one that's not so fear driven. And that is a much more quality experience. The point is not to have great experiences in this life. The point is to have profound and deep human experiences. We mistake too often having a great human experience for having a quality human experience. All of our lessons are contained in that fear and in that pain. We don't get many lessons from large paychecks and from rewarding relationships and from everything going perfectly. Like we do not grow in those circumstances. And this is why God gives us challenges, or spirit or universe gives us challenges, is because it wants us to grow. The point of this life is to grow, not run scared and not to live in constant enjoyment, but to grow as individuals. And as individuals on this path, what we need to do is be more curious about that aspect of the spiritual journey. We need to lean away from, I hope everything goes well, to what am I learning here? How can I grow out of this experience? And how can I become a better person out of this experience? If I had everything that I wanted, if I had millions and millions of dollars and all the drugs in the world, I'd be dead in a couple days, right? Like if I got all the things that I wanted, I would be fucked. And so understanding that this thing is actually taking care of me by not giving me everything that I want is a super important aspect of my life. To understand that like the things that are meant for me will come to me and the things that are not are going to stay away from me. So it's not about me getting everything that I want. And whenever anything goes wrong, I have to be up in arms about it. I can be at peace with those things and I can live my life in a more peaceful sense. Peace is a goal. Joy is a product of peace, but like happiness is not the goal. We all want to live this happy life where we're gleeful all the time and just comfortable and secure. That's not the point of this life. The point is a quality growth based experience. And when we lean more into our curiosity and more out of our, perpetual knowingness, we have a chance at that.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, but I'm sure we will come back to the topic of fear in the future.
Fear is always coming back. Fear is the understanding here. That's our baseline. And much of this podcast will be about the freedom that we find moving away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us on Instagram at The Fault of Grace.
And wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah,
Lovely.
lovely. And please feel free to DM us on Instagram with any questions, and we would love to answer them on here.
I am always happy to talk through how these things happen and how these things show up in our lives. So please, 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 if you find yourself thinking about fear, feeling like talking about connection or anything like that, these are all topics that we would love to discuss with you and for you. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate all of your support. We love you. Thank you.
Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday.